Welcome, fellow Stardust. Are you ready for a scare? Thank you for joining me for another ride-along review. If this is your first time, welcome. I know it looks like I'm set up to do a regular review, but I did set up in my living room earlier and wasn't really liking the way that it looked, so I decided to just come on in here and shoot it in the studio. But this will still be an unscripted review and my initial thoughts after watching the movie. So let's get into it.
What are you doing in our house?
So like most horror fans, I went into this with low expectations, and I'm really glad that I did. It wasn't a bad film or even the worst film in the franchise, but it wasn't the big masterpiece or close to a masterpiece that we're all hoping for. It was a good blood fest with some really awesome kills and a brand new storyline. We have yet another direct sequel from the first film, which I think this is now the 5th direct sequel, and I'll get into all that in my ranking video that'll be available next week. But there were just some things here and there that really brought the film down. But I'm gonna talk about the positives first, and then we'll get into the negatives. And I'll remain spoiler free until this timestamp, and I'll also give you a warning once we get there. And because I was at home, I went ahead and took some notes, so I'll be looking at these every once in a while. So off the bat, one thing I'm starting to notice about this particular franchise is that whenever they make a new film, they're basically catering to a young group who loves horror at that time, or they're trying to follow, you know, a certain trend going on at the time. For instance, for the second film, it was done in the 80s, and then the 80s is when comedy horror was becoming a pretty popular thing, and Toby really wanted to go for this, you know, black comedy genre instead of a straight horror film like his production company thought that he was going to create. And so every film after that is done in a different time period, and they're doing what's popular at the time. They're not really trying to impress or get the attention of the initial people who fell in love with Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Sure, if they can get that crowd, they'd be happy with it, but it's not who they're really going for. So even though throughout the entire franchise, they are doing callbacks from different films in the franchise and even other horror films, they still are making it unique for the time. So you can't really fault them for not satisfying the needs and wants of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre following, because they're really just trying to attract the new generation. So when you keep all that in mind, it's easier to accept a lot of the decisions that the producers, writers, and directors went with in making this film. That doesn't mean that I forgive all of its faults, but the things that people might point out may not be the things that need to be talked about or frowned upon. But I do think that whatever was missing or was lacking can be fulfilled in the film after this one if they do a continuation. You know, we've only had 1 or 2 consecutive films in the franchise, and it would be awesome to see, you know, part 1, part 2, and a part 3 instead of a part 1, part 2, and then a prequel to all of that. We haven't gone past 2 films after the first film. But to get into the positives first, right off the bat, we have some beautiful cinematography. We had some really crisp and stylized shooting. It wasn't, you know, gritty or documentary style like in the first film, but again, they aren't trying to compete or replicate the first film. This group is going to be one that a lot of audiences aren't going to be able to relate to because of their early success. They are all under 25 probably, and they're already driving around in a Tesla and have just bought up this town in order to auction off the buildings to their friends so they could all run their small businesses in the comfort and safety of a small secluded town versus an inner city where a lot of violence is happening on a regular basis, which is a positive in a way, because when we start to see Leatherface get down to business, it's a bit more gratifying. Each kill is gruesome. We get our blood and our guts and brains going everywhere. And even though I am a gore hound, I am able to appreciate when I can be grossed out or creeped out without having to see too much blood and guts like in the first film from 1974. But when they want to deliver it, I'm here for it. And in this film, they deliver it. The actors were all great. I may have not liked all the characters who were pretty annoying, but they were all portrayed really, really well. This cast is pretty diverse compared to all the other films. We've only had 2 other films that had black folks in them, and that was the third one with Ken Foree and Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3D, which had Tom Berry and Trey Songz. And in this cast, though, we've got multiple brown folks and even an Asian. So good for them. Another positive would be the sound mixing. The soundtrack didn't really stick out to me so much, but I did notice that the volume never really got too high or too low, and I just really liked their manipulation of the dialogue and the sound effects. One song that did stand out to me, though, was at the beginning of the movie, a song by Shaky Graves, who is from Austin, Texas, and I had the honor of working with at a photography studio once years ago. We held an event where a bunch of photographers came and shot him. This was years ago before he got pretty popular. And as far as spoiler-free negatives, for me, things kind of slow down at about 30-40 minutes when so many other things could be happening. You know, we have somebody hiding for incredibly too long, doing absolutely nothing. The sun is up when they're hiding and the sun is down when they come out of hiding. And in each film, and a lot of the films, you know, we have the film taking place, you know, in the daytime, then it becomes nighttime, and then it's daytime again at the end of the film. And this happens in this film as well, but not a lot is happening in that time. What we do get is great, but it takes a minute to get there. It doesn't take longer than the other films before it. It just has a weird way of getting to it, if that makes sense. The bringing back of Sally Hardesty was kind of a waste and unnecessary. It didn't really fit into this new story. They attempted to do a sort of passing of the torch type film like Scream or even Halloween, and they literally passed the torch in the film, but it was completely unnecessary. I was really excited for her to come back and wanted to see what they had in store for her, but that excitement quickly dissipated after a few of her scenes. So all in all, if you liked any of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies, go ahead and give this one a watch. It's not going to blow you away, but it's definitely worth one watch. Just like with all the other films, it's got its callbacks to previous films as well as other horror films. So you at least will have a good time finding those. So this was yet another direct sequel, but it's also a little bit of a reboot because we have some things that can't quite be explained going on. We left him in the last film where he was living with his family in a house that was on a farm, but now he's living in the town of Harlow in an orphanage with an old woman. And so I guess we're supposed to gather that after Sally was rescued from that terrible day back in the 70s, that maybe somehow the family split up or the others died and he ended up over here with this woman. I don't know, something like that. Because in the last film, we left Leatherface where he had just killed Sally's friends and he was left with Grandpa and his other family member, Drayton. And so something must have happened to the two of them to where now he's living at this orphanage with this old woman. But for some reason, he hasn't killed anybody since then, and maybe that's because Sally got away and told the press about it. But that rubbed me the wrong way a bit because the original Leatherface I don't think would have the common sense or capacity to suppress his serial killer tendencies. He wouldn't just be able to say, oh, I got caught, now I gotta chill out. To me, he was just so deranged that nothing was gonna stop him. But in this film, he has common sense and is able to see somebody without killing them on sight. That is, until his mama dies. And those first murders of the two cops and the blonde were great. His mama dying set him off and we got our Leatherface in action. Even though all of these kills were great, it did take a little too long for the girl to get killed. She sat around the car for a bit too long. And this was my issue with the girl under the bed. She went under the bed with the sun up and didn't come out from under the bed until the sun was down and it was raining outside. It just took way too long. Even though I did enjoy Richter getting his face bashed in while she was under the bed. That was beautiful. And the bus scene was perfect. We've got gallons and gallons of blood and limb after limb after limb getting chopped off. And this bus scene is another moment where we're reminded of the backstory of gun violence that this group has experienced. And gun violence to me is an interesting topic to bring up in such a violent movie. This 2022 release, shot in 2020, was really trying to shed a light on all of the things that were really percolating in 2020. You know, things like gun violence, police brutality, and gentrification, which have all been issues for quite some time, but 2020 things kind of hit the fan. I'm all for a movie trying to convey a message. I'm just not sure this was the right vehicle for all of that. It was too distracting, especially when we had Sally Hardesty and we're sitting around waiting for her big moment. But instead, we're seeing a bunch of Gen Zers take their pick at which building they want to run their small business in. It was interesting to see how they kind of made us guess who was going to be the final girl. Was it going to be this sister or the other sister? Mel was beyond annoying. Only a privileged person would have the audacity to make the comments that she made within earshot of the person she's making the comments about. Privilege. And everything that she did was just annoying, which is why her death is so satisfying. And it was hilarious because her sister pops out of the sunroof screaming for her in their self-driving Tesla. Privilege. My biggest issues with this film deal with Sally Hardesty. A lot of her decisions are dumb. The first one being when she finds the girls and locks them in her truck while she goes and kills Leatherface, knowing full well that if he were to escape her grasp, that he could just break the window in that car and kill both of those girls. Why would she trap them in there that way? And then when she finally gets to Leatherface, she speaks to him, he makes eye contact with her, and walks by her. Why is he walking by anybody? Whether he recognizes her or not, why wouldn't he kill her on sight? And why isn't she killing him on sight? Why is she letting him walk out the door, the front door, any door? It makes no sense. And how did he get all the way to the car without her shooting him? So of course he gets to the car where the girls are, and you know, it's a close call, and then finally Sally makes it to him and they have their battle. And you know, he gets her with his chainsaw and has her in the air. You know, she's getting, you know, the saw all the way through her, so you know she's dead. She is dead. So then she's thrown onto the ground, into the, you know, pile of garbage, and minutes later, miraculously, she's able to shoot him as he's about to get Lila or Mel, whichever girl, and has the power to say something and pass her over the gun. Not gonna happen in a million years. If you have a chainsaw going through your abdomen and you're being held by that chainsaw, you ain't doing anything after that, I promise you. So Sally is in front of Leatherface for maybe 5 minutes and she's already dead. What was the purpose of even having her? Oh, to pass the torch, I guess. You know, if they continue on with another film after this, I'm down to see it, but it was unnecessary to pass the torch. We didn't need to see her in order to have this new girl be the new final girl and, you know, the new lead for maybe the 10th film. It was a waste of a reprisal of a role, honestly. They could have brought her back in the next film. The whole Sally Hardesty thing was a build-up to kind of a letdown. But I am interested to see what Lila might do, because she's likely to come back in the 10th film and go find Leatherface at his old home, because after the credits, we see Leatherface going back to his original house from the first film. Because we've seen Lila's character arc go from a weak victim to a badass who seeks revenge. And so she heard all those news reports and saw the newspaper clippings, and after this experience, I can see her wanting to go back like Sally Hardesty and try to find him and, end his serial killing spree. Just like in all of the other previous installments, we get a lot of callbacks to previous films in the franchise, as well as other horror films. A callback to another horror film would be when Leatherface pops out of the water, like Jason does in the first Friday the 13th. They also did that in the third one, and I forget the other one they did that in. And they actually brought back the first chainsaw from the very first movie. It was so old that sometimes it was difficult to even get it started. But we did miss some callbacks that I'm sure a lot of people were looking forward to, like sticking a person onto a hook or in a freezer, having somebody jump out of a window to escape Leatherface. We didn't get to see any grimy meat hanging from the ceiling being cured or dried out, and we didn't get the big family dinner. And I'm okay with these things not coming back into a new film. Again, they're trying to make something new while still paying respect to the original film. It's just unfortunate that this story felt a bit hollow, and there was just a disconnect with the group that we were following. There was no sympathy or sadness. It was just a good gore fest, which, hey, I'm here for. So for me, Texas Chainsaw Massacre earns, I'll give it 3 rainbow skulls out of 5 for now. My ranking video of the entire franchise will be available next week, and I'll be rating each film as I rank them, and my rating could change then, so don't hold me to my rating today. I'm teetering between 2.5 and 3. But for now, I'll give it a 3. Well, that's all I have for right now for this unscripted review. I'm sure there's some more things that'll come to mind as I mull this over a bit more, but I'll go ahead and throw those thoughts into my ranking video, which again will be available next week. So, if you haven't already, go ahead and hop on the Rainbow Fright Freight Train and hit that subscribe button along with the notification bell. That way you'll get notified every time I upload a new video. I hope I see you next time. Peace.